This is part 15 of Angular CLI tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss some of the common Angular linting rules. We find the linting rules in an Angular project in this file called tslint.json. As you can see, there are several linting rules. Depending on your project requirements, you may add, remove, or modify these rules. In this video, let's discuss some of the common rules that we have in this file. The first rule that we'll look at is the quotemark rule. Quotemark rule specifies whether you want to wrap your strings in single or double quotes. This rule is present in our linting configuration file, and if you want to find that rule within this file, launch the find window by pressing Ctrl F and then search for your rule. In this case, we want to search for quotemark, and as you can see, the default is single, meaning strings must be wrapped in single quotes. Now if you want to change that, you can do so. For example, if you want to wrap your strings within double quotes, you may change this to double. And if you look at the code that we've got, that is generated by the Angular CLI, notice by default all the strings are wrapped in single quotes. And I have just run the ng-lint command on this new Angular project, and as you can see, all the files have passed linting. Now let's introduce some linting errors. Let's wrap the string title within our app component in double quotes instead of single quotes like that. At the moment, notice Visual Studio Code is not able to report this linting error. In our next video, we'll discuss how to enable Visual Studio Code to report linting errors, so we have the opportunity to fix them as we are developing our application. At this point, if we run ng-lint command, it should report this quotemark rule violation as a linting error. But before we do that, let's discuss few other linting rules. Next we have no-trailing-whitespace rule. This rule disallows trailing whitespace at the end of a line. Now if you look at all these lines that we have here, we don't have a trailing whitespace at the end of any of these lines. Now let's introduce a whitespace right here. Save our changes. So this is another linting error. Semicolon rule. This rule specifies that a line should be terminated with a semicolon. If you look at the code that we have within our Angular project, notice every line is terminated with a semicolon. If we miss a semicolon, then that's another linting error. Next, we have comment format rule. This rule specifies that single line comments must begin with a space. Within our root component, let's introduce a single line comment. This is a comment. Now notice this comment starts with a space. If I remove this space, this is another linting error. Component-class-suffix rule. This rule enforces that a component class should end with the suffix component. If you look at our root component class, notice the class name ends with this word component. If I remove this word component from the class name, then we are introducing another linting error. Finally, we have use lifecycle interface rule. This rule enforces that you add the implements keyword for every lifecycle hook you use. In our Angular 2 tutorial, we discussed ng-on-init lifecycle hook. To use a lifecycle hook in our Angular project, there are 3 simple steps. First, import the lifecycle hook interface. In this case, the interface is onInit, and then we make our class implement the interface. And then finally, provide the implementation for the interface member. This interface onInit has got just one member, which is ng-on-init. So we need to provide implementation for that method. So these are the 3 steps to implement a lifecycle hook. This second step right here, making the class implement the lifecycle hook interface, is optional. Whether we make the class implement the interface or not, the application works exactly the same way. But it is good to make the class implement the interface because we will get some compile time checking. For example, if we misspell the lifecycle hook interface method name, notice we get an error right away. When I hover the mouse over this red squiggly, look at what it says. Class app incorrectly implements interface onInit. So to have that compile time checking, it's always good to make the class implement the respective lifecycle hook interface. But from a functionality standpoint, whether the class implements the respective lifecycle hook interface or not, it's not going to make a difference in any way. Now this linting rule, use lifecycle interface rule, enforces that we add the implements keyword for every lifecycle hook we use. Within our project, we are implementing ng on-init lifecycle hook. So we are implementing on-init interface. Now, if we remove this implements keyword, it's not going to make a difference in any way from the functionality standpoint, but this linting rule, use lifecycle interface rule, will report that as a linting error. So let's save all our changes so far and then run ng lint command once again. There we go. Lint errors found in the listed files. We have deliberately violated these linting errors. For each rule that we have violated, we got a corresponding linting error. And notice all these linting errors are within our root component file, which is app.component.ts. In addition to the file name, we also have the line and column number where we have that specific linting error. At the moment, we've got 6 linting errors. Comment must start with a space, there's a trailing white space, double quote should be single quote. Remember, all strings must be wrapped in a pair of single quotes instead of double quotes. We are missing a semicolon, we are missing implementing lifecycle hook interface on in it, and finally the name of the class app should end with the suffix component. Some of these linting errors support automatic fix. To have these linting errors fixed automatically, all we need to do is run the lint command with fix option. So let's do that quickly. ng lint --fix. There we go. It's able to fix 3 linting errors. It's not able to fix these 3. I think it fixed trailing white space, double quote should be single quote, and missing semicolon. It's not able to fix comment must start with a space, implement lifecycle hook interface, and the name of the class app should end with the suffix component. So let's fix these 3 linting errors manually. So first let's start with comment must start with a space, and then the component class should have the suffix component, and it also should implement on init interface. Let's save all our changes and run our ng lint command once again. There we go. All files pass linting as expected. So to fix those linting errors that support automatic fix, use the fix option along with the ng lint command. Use the type check option to control the type checking. We discussed this option in our previous video. Use the format option to format the output. The default is prose, but we can also use JSON, stylish, verbose, etc. To see the list of all options that we can use with ng lint command, their data types and default values, use ng lint --help. There we go. We have all the options as expected. At the moment, Visual Studio Code is not able to display linting errors within the editor. In our next video, we'll discuss how to enable Visual Studio Code to display linting errors here, so we have the opportunity to fix them as we are writing our code. Thank you for listening and have a great day.